Hello everybody, what is up? Cobra here with another installment in my series of how to play the Powder Keg 1914. Now in this video we're going to be going over the way you set up units in this game. It's a very cool and unique style of setup that I have used and implemented in this game, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So basically, if you refer to the national setup charts, or dashboards as I refer to them, you'll see that you have a summary of your nation, their traits, certain trade deals that they have, as well as a setup chart. The setup chart's on the back side because once you have stuff set up, you're not really going to need it anymore. And it's likely that you'll have it face side up so you can know your traits and any kind of war material bonuses that you may have. So in terms of setting up and getting to the core of this video, you can see here that every nation has been set up except for Germany. I left Germany out of the first video, and they're the mainstay of this game, the kind of leader of the Central Alliance, and definitely the most powerful. So we'll be going over their setup and how to actually set units up. So you'll see that on the front of a national dashboard, you have homeland territories listed, and so you can see here for Germany, that is all their territories in Europe, excluding Heligoland. So if you see here, all of these territories are German, they're in Europe, so they're homeland, and you can see that Heligoland, the island off the coast of Germany, is not considered homeland. You'll also see that there is a setup order, and you can see there you have US, AustriaHungary, Japan, Russia, Britain, France, Germany, and then Serbia. So what that means is that nations set up their units in that order. So you'll see there that since we're setting up Germany, the last person to set up their units would have been the French. Another big aspect of how this game is set up and how the gameplay starts while you're setting up is the fact that you can see here by the setup chart for Germany in particular that it says homeland territories, 25 infantry, 3 cavalry, 7 artillery, 2 siege guns, a railroad gun, a fighter, and 2 zeppelins. Now, in a game similar to Axis and Allies, you would be setting up different units in different territories as per the chart. But in this game, you're given the freedom to set up however you want with some rules and stipulations. So you could see there that that big stack of units would only be for homeland zones, excluding Heligoland down there. So getting on to that, we have actually setting up units. Now, because there's a specific order to setting up units, as well as the freedom given to setting up, it allows you to be able to choose how you want to play right off the bat. You're not kind of dumped into the pants of the leaders of these countries and how they had positioned their units at the start of the war. So, going over the other setups that have happened, the first nation that gets to set up after the Americans is Austria-Hungary. And so we shall move over to this side of the map, or this side of Europe, and you can see the Austrian nation down here. And so you can see that over here we have a large Austrian army in the south ready to invade Serbia, as they are required to at the beginning of the game, as well as small picket forces of infantry and cavalry defending the Russian border. You definitely have to put some thought into the setup of your units, because for Austria-Hungary, they're forced to go after Serbia, so they definitely want to have a good force to go and crush the Serbians, or at least try. But then that means that the even stronger Russian Empire will be poised to attack them if they leave their border too undefended. So basically every nation has to figure out what they want to do, their strategies early game, and also how to best set their units in different places that allow for the best defense. The later your setup is in the order, so that would be Germany, you have the bigger advantage, because now as Germany, I can see, if I come over here, that the French have gone in depth in terms of defending their south, but they've kind of weakened the amount of forces in the northern region. Of course, me having to go through Belgium and Luxembourg if I wanted to get in there. I can see, though, that they did put an artillery in the Meuse-Argonne, so I may think that if I were to invade Belgium, an artillery is a better offensive unit. So the fact that it's positioned near Belgium means that they may plan on supporting the Belgians by moving that artillery into Belgium when I invade. You can see also that they deployed a few of their ships up north, as well as a couple infantry, meaning that they are slightly wary of a German naval assault on France. Now, Britain down here, or up here, is neutral at the start of the game, and they are likely to go to war on the second turn, and they can usually be held out of the war if the nations really try until the end of the second turn. So, or the second round. And so you can see here that while the British Navy technically blockades Germany's ability to get to France, they are neutral, which means the Germans could sail through here if they're nice and stay on the British good side and don't do something like invading Belgium. On the other hand, and even worse for Germany, is the way the Russians have decided to set up. Now you can see here that the Russians have deployed a few of their infantry along their Baltic coast, making sure that the Germans can't launch any naval attacks. So, as well as that, the Russians have also positioned a large stack of infantry and artillery on the German border, as well as in Poland, positioning a bomber closer to Germany, meaning that the Russians are likely to plan to be very aggressive against the Germans, and even more aggressive against the Austrians, as they've positioned a large force over in the south to hopefully try and relieve pressure on the Serbians. The Russians also placed a few units down here in the far south, just in case the Ottoman Empire is aligned early game and decides to invade. The Russians have also postured their fleet. You can see it's much weaker than the Germans' fleet, but the fact that it's protected by barrages means that it's relatively safe, and the fact that they positioned their capital units up in off the coast of Riga means that they might be planning to be launching some sort of offensive against a possibly smaller German force in the Baltic. So getting to the actual setup here, it's really as simple as the chart says. So with the Germans, I have the units that they are given, the ones that I read off to you, and the fact that they are given free range in their homeland territories to set up. You'll basically be able to kind of go along, take this as a guide to how you may set up your units, or how you may think about setting up your units. And of course, this is also just going over the European theater of the war. Your setups over here may influence what's going on outside, or what kind of strategies. Maybe Germany's going more colonial, and they decide to kind of build up defenses instead of planning out offensives in Europe. So in that regards, we go on to setting up units. Now, Germany sees that France is, as usual, in a defensive state, so Germany will be planning on going on the offensive to make sure that the French are beaten back before they can really build up a lot more forces to go on the offensive. So because of that, now the Reichland down here has a river that goes across right through the border of these two French southern territories, meaning that the Germans aren't likely to launch an attack across that river because their attack would be halved. So they'll place a picket force down there, knowing that the French army would also have that disadvantage. So by placing those units there, they defend that territory pretty well, considering that they have a river at their disposal. The Rhine province, on the other hand, which is the territory of Alsace, is completely bordering France, and there's no terrain penalties or anything. So that is the best course of action for the Germans to attack across. I just forgot too that the French get fortification to place there. So now the Germans know that this is the hardest border to crack, but they're going to try and at least launch a small attack into there and try and take off some of those French units, maybe not push the territory, but at least inflict some heavy casualties. Now, the Germans also see that the French are possibly going to support Belgium if they go in, meaning that the Germans, if they lose in Belgium and maybe botch the invasion, the French will be able to easily send in reinforcements. So as the Germans, we're going to try something different and not go for Belgium at all. Because of that, we will place the another stack of 5 infantry, meaning we have 15 infantry in the Rhine province now. And that basically means that hopefully we shall be able to push into Lorraine down there with the fortification. Now the bigger question is that the Eastern Front is wide open and the Germans don't have a lot more forces to defend, but they will be placing we'll place a few infantry in the south of Prussia, a couple in Pommern, and then to defend Königsberg and West Prussia, we're going to use our artillery to shore up the line. This may not be the best strategy, as you see. You probably want to have less forces on the Western Front, as the Russians can become quite menacing if you don't let them, or you let them build up. And also because I don't want to divide out these units, but I'm just showing you guys what you can do. So, again, for that French push, we're going to place all of our artillery in the Rhine province, except for a railroad gun, which this railroad gun can only travel on these railways, which you can see in the light gray. So, considering that there are railways that go into Russia, we'll place that in Königsberg so that it may travel into Russia if it needs to, but it's not likely considering the amount of Russian forces on the border. Next up, we have some siege artillery. Now, siege artillery don't have to move into a territory to attack, so we'll place one down there to shoot over that river if we need to. And to strengthen our attack in the center, we'll place one to support those infantry. Lastly, we have a couple Zeppelins and fighters. Fighters will buff artillery, so considering we've placed the majority of artillery here, we'll place the fighter there to give some spotting support to those artillery units. Lastly, we have some Zeppelins, which are great bombers, and we'll place them out of Holstein because Holstein borders both coasts, so if we need to bomb areas in France or in Britain, if we need to, we can. We could also try and turn and bomb the Russians if things get down to that. For their naval units, the Germans' naval setup is this, and it says adjacent to homeland ports. Well, we know that homeland territories are in Europe, and all of these territories have some sort of port facility, whether it be a white port right here, a minor port, or a blue major port. And the blue major ports with this little X mark in it are areas where you can build ships, but they are a major port for all intents and purposes. So, considering that Heligoland has a special ability to create a minefield in this entire sea zone, the Germans will place the majority of their forces in Heligoland to basically protect them, because the Germans definitely, while they could take on one of the British fleets defending the North Sea barrage, they probably don't want to, and rather they want to stay a fleet in being, making sure that the British don't decide to come in and invade Germany itself. Now, the Russians were posturing their forces over in the Baltic, so to make sure that they don't get any ideas of invading Germany or doing commerce raiding in the Baltic, we'll be placing a pre-dreadnought, a transport to threaten any Russian advance because we might be able to land behind them, as well as a submarine, 2 destroyers, and we'll have the last 2 destroyers out here in the North Sea to scare off the British. In other cases, the other kinds of setups that you may have are ones like down here, where a German dreadnought, which you can see, or pre-dreadnought, which you can see in the south, has the stipulation that it can only be placed in C-Zone 55. So you can see that it has been placed in 55, and you don't get any free range on some units. They have to be placed in certain territories. Over here we have a different side of the story. So I'll move them so you can see them a bit better, but you see we have 3 German cruisers. So these 2 cruisers over here are said to be placed adjacent to the territories of Cuba and the Danish East Indies. So since it says adjacent, that means that, so for the cruiser up here in Cuba, it could be placed in C-Zone 16, 17, or 15. It doesn't say anything about being adjacent to ports, so that means 17 is also opened up to the Germans for placement. So the Germans want to try and threaten the British in the Bahamas and make sure that they can't use that naval base or base units out of it, so they'll be placing a cruiser there to help try and blockade the Bahamas. Their cruiser off of the Danish possessions in the Americas will be placed in the Caribbean to try and commerce raid the Allies. Lastly, we have this cruiser here, which says that it is to be placed anywhere in or adjacent to a Mexican West Coast territory. So some setups of this game require a little bit of geographical knowledge. So in this case, and nothing too complex, but in this case, you would have to know that this side, the west side of Mexico, is of course the west side. So like if you've seen a map before and a compass, you know that this side is west. So in that case, the Germans will be placing their cruiser right here in hopes of maybe going down south to Chile and linking up with their Pacific forces. Outside of that, that is all you need to know about setting up units and how setting up units works. So in the next video, we'll go into what these units actually do and why you may set some up in one place and others in another. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys again. Cobra, out.